Welcome to True Wellness with Dr. D, the podcast where we explore what it takes to live with vitality, balance, and purpose. I am Dr. D, and each week I'll bring you powerful tools, inspiring stories, and expert insights to help you thrive in every area of your life. From health and wellness to mindset and navigating life's challenges, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of true well-being. Be sure to check the show notes and grab your free copy of the True Wellness Checklist so you can get started on your journey to true wellness right away. Now, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I have a question for you. What if the greatest challenge leaders face today isn't external at all, but the inner narratives that actually quietly drain their brilliance? So today I am honored to be here with a good friend of mine, Rachael Hudson. And Rachael is an executive resilience and empowerment coach. She's got over 55,000 hours, you guys, on the shop floor of Human Challenge, working side by side with high potentials and leaders across the globe. So her mission, by the way, is to help high caliber humans reclaim their brilliance, both inside and out. And Rachael's unique approach, well, it blends that narrative sovereignty, the energetic recalibration, the conscious responsibility that really guides executives and visionaries to not just succeed, but actually thrive with clarity and resilience and authentic power. So if you've ever wondered how to take back your story, to lead from a place of deep alignment and really to fully embody the brilliance that you were born with, you are in for an extraordinary conversation today. So welcome, Rachael.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. So,
thanks for having me.
I mean, what exactly is it about resilience and empowerment? I mean, how did you get to this place? Because I got to tell you, right? So as human beings, sometimes life feels like it can get in the way or take over on its own or spiral out of control. So how do we deal with that?
Often it's about examining the meaning we're making of these things. So life does throw unknowns at us every second of the day. And, the only thing that allows us to navigate all of those unknowns every single time is how we interpret them, whether we interpret them as familiar or unfamiliar. And if we see it as familiar, or our system sees it as familiar, then it will respond in the way that it has always responded, hoping that it will get a good result. So how do we handle that? We look at how we interpret ourselves, our experiences, and the events.
Okay. All right. So let's take that, right? Looking at what's happening in our lives, how we interpret it. I know that you talk about the odds that we're
yes, I do.
Right? Let's start with that perspective and that way of looking at our lives. How does that shift how someone sees their life story?
Okay. So you are simply phenomenal, Danielle.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. But I mean it. The word phenomenal, would you ever own the word phenomenal? And I don't mean just go, yeah. I mean, on a cellular level, would you ever own the word phenomenal?
Yeah, that's hard for people, right? There's all the little that goes on in the back of one's heart, like phenomenal. Well, that's a really strong
word. Miraculous.
That's another really strong word.
What about unmatchable?
Well, that might be true.
What about marvelous?
Oh, marvelous, darling.
Yes, you are both unmatchable and marvelous, darling. We have to say that. Yeah. So the reason I ask that is because Dr. Ali Benazir back in 2005 or 2011. I can't remember now. My apologies. He is a mathematician and he did some statistics, and he came to the conclusion that the likelihood, the odds of you being born, so that you are right here, right now, the odds of you being born to your mum and dad are 1 in 10 to the power of 2,685,000.
Yeah, I don't even know what that number looks like.
Exactly. And it's an impossible number. It is the equivalent of 2 million people each having a trillion-sided dice.
Imagine.
2 million people throwing that trillion-sided dice, and every one of those 2 million trillion-sided dice landing on the same number. That is how unusual, how rare the odds of you being born right here, right now are. You are an unbroken chain of 4 billion years of reproduction from the very first cell. For you to be here, you are a part of an unbroken chain. You are once in all history unique.
It's like
Right?
mind blowing that when you put it into perspective, it's like, whoa.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah,
completely.
that's true. Yeah. I mean, why do you think so many of us forget that we are these miracles?
I think because the only time we ever have any concept of it, and I'm not sure we have a conscious concept of it, is when we're born. We are just pure bundles of potential. You know,
Yes.
and somehow 9 months before we were born, we hope, 9 months before we were born, that all of the cells reproduced or multiplied in the way that they did. And they didn't know what they were until the moment when they selected to be your brain tissue or your eye tissue or your heart tissue, right? That's the phenomenal nature of a cell, that it can select what it needed to be at that time. And at that time, we are completely blank slates, and yet we are in just unfathomably potentialized, right? And then as we begin to interact with the world, there are people who tell us things about ourselves, and we receive that identity, and it's known as received identity. And we receive the rules of engagement in order to feel like we belong, and we understand the behaviors that make us not belong. And so we begin to mold ourselves and shape shift away from that phenomenal potential towards belonging. And that creates an inner narrative that sometimes no longer works for us. And we energetically calibrate to whatever narrative we're using. So the power of words, Arianna Huffington said, hearts and minds are moved by words.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Hearts and minds are moved by words. And we will hear somebody say words. People may be even listening to this now. You were moved by my words about the sheer phenomenon that you are. And,
Yes.
so these are words that we hear all the time, that we are moved by. Our hearts and our minds are moved by them. The internal narrative about who we are, where we came from, what we're capable of, these all create inner narratives that, if unexamined, create ways of living, ways of feeling, ways of believing, ways of talking to ourselves. So if hearts and minds are moved by external words that we hear, imagine how much we are moved by the internal narrative that we attack ourselves with, or we apply on ourselves. So yeah, that's
Yes, I like to call them the little gremlin voices. They like to play, and you got to quiet them down. And
and they do. You're so right. I mean, you're treating them so nicely. I know a lot of people who have gremlins that shut them right up, and they will 100% not move to question it or examine it. And so many of us are subsumed, and I mean really subsumed, by beliefs about ourselves or a story about ourselves that we didn't choose
yes,
way back then, and we have buried it so deep that we sometimes would never even think that it was relevant
right.
until we suddenly find ourselves being limited in relationships at work, limited in our ability to be effective, limited in our ability to look after ourselves in moments of turbulence,
Yes.
all of these kinds of things.
Yes. Well, I know you talk about narrative sovereignty. So
Mm.
tell us a little bit about narrative sovereignty. Like, how do we know when we've given our story away, and what does it look like to reclaim it?
Reclaiming. I call it reauthoring at the speed of life.
I like it. Reauthoring at the speed of life.
Reauthoring at the speed of life. It's like, first of all, we have to become aware. So the kind of sequence I use is conscious responsibility. First of all, we have to accept conscious responsibility for what we are creating in our life. Now, as we said, there's turbulence, there's unknown things that happen all the time that we couldn't possibly predict, right? And
Right.
some of those things we are not in control of, but what we are in control of is our ability to choose the meaning we make of it. And
Yes.
we must take responsibility for how the meaning we are making of circumstances, situations, people, places, and things, the meaning we are making of it is creating an internal narrative that
Yes.
is changing our energy. It's changing the shape we cut in the world and how the world receives us, right?
Yes.
So it's my job to help emerge from the realms of unknown, the stories that we're operating with that are causing the trouble or the challenge in the current moment. Once
Yes.
we've emerged those stories, then so we review them, we revise them,
Yes.
and we rewrite them. From rewriting and editing them, then we begin to recalibrate to the truth and how we would then show up to that. And
Mm.
once we're able to do that, so this is what narrative sovereignty is. It's recognizing the stories, it's accepting 100% responsibility and accountability for changing those.
Mm.
Then I'm sorry, I get very excited about
I
it.
can tell. It's good though. This
I'm
is awesome.
so excited.
Yeah.
And it's about looking at those stories and how we are letting them rule us by default rather than actually choosing, putting ourselves
Yes.
into a place of choice, choosing to respond differently to something, to believe something different about ourselves, and to feel something different about ourselves
Yes.
for the greater good, for the good of your pure phenomenal potential.
I love that.
So, and once we have done that, we recalibrate, we reinvent to the pure potential part of you, the part that's been obscured, the absolute magnitude of you. And from that point, we begin to radiate something new, which means we're creating something new. So that's narrative sovereignty, owning it, narrative, our story.
Yeah. So, and creating something new that we get to choose and have a say in versus what's been, put on to us from all of our experiences and such. Can you give us an example of that, like an example of that kind of journey, like maybe yourself or from one of your clients that where
Yeah,
you
interesting. I had a Foundations Rewritten call, that's the name of one of my programs, with a young man recently who was very anti-money. And he was so anti-money, all for nature, all for ecology and environmental support. And I completely back all of that. But he needed to get backing. And he had a particular view about money and people with money. And it was a very unkind review about people and money. And so we were looking at that story, and I'm saying, this, we're talking about currency. We're talking about a currency of energy here.
yes,
What are you making about the story of currency, which is an energy about this? And he said, well,
yeah,
it's just, I've never met a person with money who wasn't a bleep, whatever
sleep.
that word might be, you know. And I said, so let's think about nature. Where in nature can you not see a transaction of energy?
Mm,
And so we started examining this belief, this story that he was making up, which was keeping him in a place of poverty. And I don't mean survival, I mean poverty.
yes,
And yet he had some incredible ideas for which to bring to fruition, he would need backing from these very people he was so derogatory about. And so he was in direct conflict. His belief system that had been encouraged in him as he was growing up about people with money who were successful,
Mm.
was actively thwarting his ability to move forward and get the backing he needed for a very much needed by the world project. So we worked on that, and how as soon as he was released of that understanding that money is just an energetic currency that is
Yeah.
present in every part of nature itself,
Yes.
then and that moved forward, and he got some backing. So yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Money is it's a big topic, like all the way around. And I see even in sort of today's state of the economy and all the uncertainty and people having a lot of different financial issues, like it's a really big thing for us to take a look at. I noticed, thinking about that belief. So in our little town here, they're looking at they're doing the budget for the year, and they're looking at what the taxes are going to be, and they proposed a 40% tax hike. And of course, the community is up in arms, like nobody wants a 40% tax hike. And it was funny. I attended the meeting to understand a little bit more about what's going on. My first thought is not, oh my gosh, they're gouging us, or they're pocketing our money, or they're doing these things. My first thought is, okay, well, why are they finding that necessary? But as I sat there in the meeting, it was super interesting to watch. You could automatically pick up on what people's narratives are, right? Because honestly, the board members, they're members of the community. Whatever happens is going to happen to them too. I don't think that they're out for their self-interest in any way, and they're trying to manage things that have gone wrong in the past. But there was a gentleman who stood up in the community, and he is a real estate investor. He's lived in the community his entire life and started real estate investing in the community. And someone made a comment, and it was kind of the same perspective as your client had, like, who's this guy to talk? And the guy, I really believe, was speaking from an educated position, saying, hey, you guys, like, okay, what you're proposing is kind of ridiculous. It's going to mean I have to raise rent for my tenants and this, that, and everything else. But maybe there's some sort of middle ground. What can that middle ground look like? So it was an intelligent conversation. But then somebody chimed up over here with one of those comments that had to do with, obviously, he is coming from a space of wealth. So it's interesting to see that, but it does make a drastic difference in what happens to us in our lives. I see it. I see it all the time. I'll do a lot of discovery calls with clients, and or potential clients, and they're coming in from this place of like scarcity, like
Yeah.
real scarcity. And it's like, hey, well, if you don't reclaim your health, then how are you going to reclaim your life and your income?
Well,
This this money narrative is so strong.
yeah. And it's really interesting because people, my experience, and I'm sure that you maybe come across this as well, is that we don't realize that it's the stories that we are using about our health as well
Yes,
that
absolutely.
mean that we choose to eat something over others, or our constitution or our heritage. I'm one of 5 children. My dad had a heart attack when he was 40, and I think I was 19. I think he's had a quintuple bypass, all of that kind of thing. Last year he was given 8 to 9 months to live. That he's now outlived that prognosis by over 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I swear to you, the only reason is because he chose that there was no way he was going yet. I've
Yes.
never known a man that he was literally in kidney failure. It's like,
Yes.
no, I'm not going yet. And I've seen that kind of resolve come when someone literally in that moment is, I'm not having this anymore for myself, I'm not settling for this anymore,
Yes.
and I can't keep doing what I've always done and expect a different response. I have to start doing something differently. And what does that look like? So even if it is just one less coffee a day and one more glass of water, that's a start, and then you build something. But more than, it has to start with the choice, rather the choice of enabling yourself,
Mhm.
aiming yourself, rather than disenabling yourself. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, kind of goes back to what you said before, in that space, really a radical responsibility. Like, yes, we cannot control everything that happens in our lives or all the different people in our life, but we can have some control over the way that we respond.
Yeah.
And, from what I'm hearing you say, when we start to dismantle those narratives that have kind of been handed down to us, we then have a choice into how we're going to proceed forward. And that, I mean, that's pretty darn powerful.
Really very, very powerful.
Words, like you said, are so critical. The research, by the way, like, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the research on for diagnosis, for example, like cancer diagnosis, when someone is told, okay, you've got 6 months to live, it's almost amazing how that sort of comes to fruition. And I always tell people, it's just forget the diagnosis. If you pigeonhole yourself into a specific diagnosis, then
Oh,
that is the direction that you are going to head.
yeah, it's a whole new argument around the labelist culture. I
Yeah.
have known people who have had a suggestion of something. We're testing you for this. And
Hmm.
they didn't have it, but in the process of we're testing you for this and the result where they found out they didn't have it, they manifested the symptoms of the thing, and not just one or two of the symptoms. If they'd taken the diagnostic statistical manual out of the drawer and looked at every single one of the symptoms, they literally manifested every one of the
Oh, yeah.
symptoms. That is the power of the mind.
Yes.
Now, don't get me wrong, we are limited sometimes by any conditions that we might have. And there's a speaker out there who's really very inspiring called Serena, and he's a cerebral palsy. He can neither speak nor write, so he's the speaker who cannot speak, and he's the writer who cannot write because of his conditions. And I don't even know whether I've described that correctly. No offense intended. And he has someone who speaks for him, and the power of his words that come through.
Mhm.
You look at Nick Vujicic, I think it is, and he's an Australian motivational speaker,
Uh-huh.
and he has no arms and legs, and that's how he introduces himself. And he talks about how he has chosen to optimize his life, and he has met people far worse off than himself. And so when we look at, okay, so that person can do that because they have money. Well, if
Right.
that person can do that because they have money and the comfort of wealth, which is holding us back, then what are we doing that's holding us back?
Yes. Yes.
You
That's
know,
part of radical self-responsibility, right? What
absolutely.
am
The
I
moment,
that
yeah.
has me in this space? What am I doing that has me in this place? It's funny, but we deal with clients with all sorts of health issues. And there is a dramatic shift that takes place when, say, for example, someone is struggling with their weight and they're like, I can't lose weight. I can't lose weight. I can't lose weight. I can't lose. Well, number one, they've now programmed themselves not to be losing weight. But
Exactly.
number two, you start to explore a little bit and you find out, oh, okay, well, they're eating in the middle of the night, or they're eating things that are going to put on weight, and they're just not paying attention. But they're it's not that they intentionally um it's not that they intentionally are deceiving in their words, I can't lose weight. It is that they actually can't see it, right?
Yes.
Like, don't like realize it. Like, oh my gosh, like, wow, maybe eating in the middle of the night is having an impact on my weight. And it takes that moment of clarity then to actually begin to have stuff shift, that moment of radical self-responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And that conscious radical self responsibility was okay, what am I doing?
Mhm.
Whether I like it or not, take the judgment out of it, take the feeling out of it. What am I doing that
Yes.
I enjoy doing that I must stop doing to get my end result? And what am I not doing that I must start doing that I don't want to
Yeah.
affect change? I kind of have another concept that I think about. Things happen to us. We are affected affected by it. And then there are some of those things that actually have an effect on us. We are affected by it.
Yes.
But then for some of those things that we are both affected and affected by, we can become infected by them.
Yes.
We talk about these viral posts that are out there, and we don't realize that sometimes we infect ourselves with some viral beliefs like,
Oh,
I
boy.
can't lose weight.
Yes.
I can't lose weight. I can't lose weight. I can't lose weight. So then all we do is think about not being able to lose weight, as you've just said. And that's the only image that we have, that struggle, that limit.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved, when we first met, I ran the half marathon. I don't know if you remember. And this is a couple of years ago. And there was a big shift for me in that one day when I couldn't, and I was saying, I can't pass that particular distance. I just couldn't do it. And I tried 7 or 8 times. And for some reason, I literally hit that wall at that point and I couldn't go past it. Then one day I just woke up and I said, right, I'm not going to do that loop. I'm going to run towards my office and I'm going to see how far I can get. I'm not going to look at the pacer. I'm not going to look at the distance. I'm just going to see how far I can get. So I thought, instead of deciding how far I couldn't get, I chose to discover how far I could get. And
Wow.
in doing that, I ran almost 10 miles.
Wow.
And I couldn't get past the 7-mile up until that point.
I want you to say that again and say it real slowly so everybody caught that, right? Instead of deciding
Instead of deciding what I could not do,
Mhm.
I decided to discover what I could do.
So darn powerful, right? So darn powerful because in the former, right, deciding what you cannot do, you've already locked yourself into this box. And
Yeah.
there's no other outcome that could be possible if that's the box. It's funny, we were working with a client and she was locked in this box that she didn't believe that she could ever be well. And I had to have a straight conversation. I'm like, so long as you're holding on to this belief that you can't be well. And she had elected to have a procedure done that was damaging to her health, but she was so stuck in the decision, right? In the consequence of the decision, that what she never realized was how much she was blocking her ability to actually heal. And we see it. I mean, we see it all the time. We do it every day. I'm sure I've probably done it multiple times today, right? Blocked myself in some way without even realizing that I've actually blocked myself.
Yeah. It's crazy when I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to use that word now, right? There are so many things that we're not, anyway, I met a coach recently who invited me to collaborate with him, working with someone who, it was 1 hour of 2 people identifying each person's perspective, their purpose and their value. So I think one of the things that we often miss, I love your analogy of talking about in a box. And the thing is that decide or discover, you can decide the box you're in, or you can decide to discover what's 1 inch outside of that box.
Yeah.
You can just let down one side of that box to
Yeah.
explore 1 inch further. And that then puts you in a discomfort zone, which before long, the more you explore that becomes easier and easier. And then you move further. And before you know it, the box that you were in is dice sized and it's way, way, way away from you.
Exactly.
You're
Yep.
now in a much bigger environment.
Mhm.
I was going to say something else and I can't remember what it was. Yes, that confirmation bias. What we do know is human beings get better at stuff with practice.
Yes.
That's good stuff and bad stuff. If we do something that's good for us and we do a lot of it, we get really good at it. And if we do something that's bad for us and we do a lot of it, we get really good at it. And human beings find evidence of the very thing they are looking for.
Yes.
So if we are saying, I can't lose weight or I can't do this for myself, then that is the evidence we will find.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I invite you all to become Sherlock Holmes. Just look for different evidence evidence to support something else. You know, the power of our mind is just so strong. And the truth is, we are the ones who are in control of our mind.
Yes. We've forgotten that. Or we get trapped. I mean, gosh, I mean, social media, the scrolling, the all
Yeah,
of
the doom scrolling.
where we've got to come out of this literally trance state to start to be back in the center of
Yeah,
driving the ship, so to speak, right?
yeah,
Because every scroll, with every, looking outside of ourselves for the answers versus inside of ourselves. I mean,
yeah.
it's really what's going on in this day and age. I think is it's fascinating when you like take a step back and you watch. Like I even watch myself too, because social media is not my favorite thing. And as a business owner, it is something that I need to do. Having a virtual practice, it is something that I need to do. And I have a box because I still resist the heck out of it.
Yeah.
but I even watch myself because I have to go onto these platforms, and then I find myself doing the scroll like everybody else. And I'm like, what are you doing? Right. Yeah. So we end up in this space and we can't see it. It takes time before we're like, holy crap, I've been scrolling for the last 15 minutes. That's 15 minutes of my life that I've wasted on, you know, watching weird videos or whatever. Hey, this is Dr. D. I just wanted to remind you that you can get started on your true wellness journey. Go ahead and check the show notes and grab a link to the True Wellness Checklist. Now, let's get back to the episode.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that we forget when we're scrolling is that we are sensory creatures. And that's every one of our senses. And we are really doing ourselves a disservice. We're cheating ourselves from the sensory experience of life when all we're doing is activating really short-term dopamine reward but through our visual senses.
Yeah.
And I think that's also reflected in our food choices and
Yes.
our need for very fast gratification to our taste buds before we move on. So I think there are so many ways that we can become more consciously present when we're eating, become more mindful when we're eating, become more mindful and connected when we're talking to somebody. Use eye contact, be aware of their body language, see more of them than just this, and be willing to receive someone's energy on all levels using every one of our senses. I mean,
Yes.
clearly we hope we're not going to find out how good they taste, right? But we hope that they're going to be clean. But to actually smell somebody, to truly appraise more than just the first visual, look at the nonverbals, and to receive the energy that they're in. And I think the more we allow ourselves to be aware of other people's energies, the shape that they cut, then we can become so much more aware of the shape that we cut in the world.
Yeah.
And that then makes us more consciously responsible for ourselves. That then allows us to change because we take accountability and responsibility. So we
Mm-hmm.
change how we think, how we feel, how we believe, and that changes our outcome.
Yes, I love that, and I wanna dive into something with you that I think is really important because everything is energy, and I think when we start to see this, like I live it at a very visceral level, right? Because part of what I do in my practice
Yeah.
is, I do very specific kinesiologic testing, very different than other forms of kinesiologic testing. But everything is energy and everything has its own energy. And I know that you talk about like energetic recalibration. And that's some big words, big fancy words, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so what is energetic recalibration in practical terms, right? And how do our listeners begin to recalibrate, when they feel drained or they feel out of alignment?
Great question. So think of a word that makes you feel. And I realize I'm speaking to somebody who understands energy, so you probably won't use these words very often. But think of a word that makes you feel small.
A word that makes me feel small. bad?
Bad. What about disappointing? I'm really disappointed in you,
Yes.
or I've disappointed myself, or I am disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some kind of hacks, energy hacks. It's almost impossible to keep crying if you look up
Yes.
like that. It's almost
Head
impossible
up when you're crying.
to keep crying. Um, there is something, if you put a pen or a pencil or a tube in your mouth lengthways or widthways, and you
Under
hold that so
under your lip. So for our listeners, if you just did right in your mouth, you're biting it, or are you putting it under your lip? Biting it. So
I'm
bite your
biting,
pen.
yeah.
Which the
And if
ice up.
you hold that for 50 seconds, 30 seconds, sorry, the neural pathways in the brain think you are smiling.
Mm.
They don't know that you're not smiling, but your muscles are doing everything that a face does when it's smiling. So
Yes.
the neural pathways in your brain begin to release. So I understand. I'm no neuroscientist, so there's my caveat. You know, but the thing is, every single thing we have. If I said to you, and I did at the beginning, you are once in all history phenomenal. How does that make you feel? Before I gave you the stats.
Well, I mean, so there's the wow, like that's really awesome, right? So there's that moment of whoa, and then there's that reality moment of, well, am I really, right?
Right.
So there's
Am I really? Or, literally, if I said to you, and I did, you are phenomenal, you went, oh, you are too. So
yeah,
do you remember?
yes,
And these words, we don't own them.
yeah,
Not only do we not own them, we cannot imagine what other people would think if we owned them, and we ourselves feel that there's a lot of pressure in that. So people
yes,
who are generally depressed, who say they can't, they play smaller. There are physiological representations in their body that are consistent that
yes,
make them smaller. Their heart space is often closed. They are generally more hunched. They generally look at the ground more often.
mhm,
They generally don't smile very much. There
right,
are particular physiological behaviors, and they bring with them an energy. So the
yeah,
Heart Math Institute, they identify that every single organ has an electrical pulse,
yes,
right?
absolutely,
The
hmm
heart has the biggest electrical pulse, which,
yes,
if I remember rightly, can emit up to 6 to 10, I think it's meters beyond our heart,
uh-huh,
right?
yep,
So
yes,
when our heart is in coherence, our heart is open, people will feel that magnetic field from that pulse 6 to 10 meters away from you.
absolutely,
If you're walking down the street and somebody is low, you can see it. You don't need to see their face. They can be 100 yards away and you know that they're not happy. Similarly, when someone's happy and you just look and they don't need to tell you, you can tell. That energy, right?
yeah,
So and you can tell from somebody's facial, its energy is showing up physiologically.
yes,
So once we choose our story, we choose how we want to react, we choose how we want to respond, we choose what we want to believe about ourselves and others in the world.
yes,
Then we can take back our ability to create our energy. If
right,
I asked you, I know that you know neurolinguistic programming. So if I asked you to think of without wishing to put you in a position, the first time you met your husband,
uh-huh.
right? Now, I don't know if anybody else saw this, but there was an immediate spread of energy light here as you smiled.
So my forehead literally changed, is what
Yeah,
you're saying, for those who are listening audio.
right. So, oh yeah, sorry, I forget we're on audio. And the wonderful thing about that is the mind also doesn't process past, present, or future.
Mhm.
So I asked you to think about that moment. How many years ago was it?
Oh gosh. 22 years ago, 23 years ago, 20 something.
22 or 23 years ago. Okay.
20
That's
something years
a long time. And
ago.
yet Your body still remembered. In that moment, I said, what was it like when you met your husband? Your system immediately went back to that moment, but it wasn't feeling it in the past. It was being felt in this moment,
Yes.
right? Possibly lower intensity, but it was still being felt here in this moment or reproduced in this moment by your system.
Yes.
Right. So when we are walking around, if you think about the compound effect, it's the same. If I think, I know you love your animals, and I know in the past you have lost animals. How
Yes.
did you feel when you lost?
Yeah.
Right. And suddenly the energy, there was a
Changed.
yes.
Yeah.
And what happens is if we have repeatedly experienced that sort of reaction as a result to the thoughts that we are having,
Mm-hmm.
and we constantly say, I can't lose weight, the compound effect of somebody saying to themselves, decade after decade after decade, I can't lose weight.
Yeah.
The energy around that is so small. Their energetic body, their ability to establish boundaries around the behaviors that would allow them to lose weight, the energy emitting from that person around that thing is so small because it's already aligned to not being able to do it.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
so energetic recalibration is when we begin to change that story and that narrative. We begin to set off new neural pathways, and those connections have their own energetic
Yes.
frequency, as it were. And that's so we recalibrate energetically to the new story. That's what I
Yeah.
mean.
So let's talk about that in a practical level, right? So like when you work with people, how do you move them to that space of recalibration? Like what is something practical that our listeners can take on to start to be aware that A, there's a need to recalibrate, and B, to start to move toward that recalibration?
And that's a great question. And now you've asked me, you've stumped me.
Well,
Okay.
I'm sure it's different on a case by case basis, depending on where somebody is and what it is that they're dealing with, and sort of what's the box that
Yeah. So the
they're
box
stuck in.
is kind of marginal gains, so step by step.
Yeah.
More frequently than not, people come to see me and they have blanketed their life with one problem that is not relevant to all of their life.
Yes.
But it's blanketed and they are buried underneath that blanket of,
Right.
I can't do this. And the truth is, I can't lose weight. You can't lose weight like that.
Right.
You literally can't lose weight
There's
like
no
that.
magic formula. There's no silver bullet. There's no magic injection.
Well, you know, you're very right. And so one step would be, what's one thing you can do towards your goal? Can you think of one thing that you can do? We're not asking you to lose 10 stone now, or 140 pounds now. We are asking you to do one thing. What is one thing that you are willing to do now to make a change? Right. And actually to manage that goal. So if they then say, I will give up all sugar, you know, is that realistic?
Right.
Is that practical? So then I would say, okay, I can hear that you're willing to give up all sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that that's plausible
Yes.
and that it's possible, but is it probable?
Yes.
Right. And then they'll go, especially when their diet is pretty much sugar,
Right.
They'll say, okay, so is there one type of sugar on one occasion that you might like to
Yes.
that you would be willing to stop for the next week? What would you do? And let's test that muscle,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and because discipline always gets better results than motivation. And when it comes to something like losing weight or managing one's health, motivation, a lot of people fall at the hurdle of motivation, and actually
Yes.
it's the discipline that makes it
Yes.
doable. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
the first thing I would do is, what are you willing to do? And that word willing is really key.
Yeah.
What are you willing? What
And
might stop you?
yes.
What
And
blocks?
that brings into that whole like radical responsibility, or I know you call it conscious responsibility, right? Is it conscious?
Radical conscious works. I call it conscious responsibility because
Yeah.
radical, I quite often think radical is a bit too absolute, you know.
Okay.
Conscious responsibility, I think, is I know what I'm doing and I'm choosing to stay here or I'm choosing to change it. Whereas radical is I am. I
Yeah,
just think it's a little bit dogmatic, that's all.
I love it.
Yeah,
Well,
I love it.
it's being in integrity, right? Like I always tell people, like, okay, so you're not going to live your life, for example, being on a really strict and regimented dietary regimen forever, right? But it becomes, you go out with a friend and you're like, you know what, I'm going to choose to have this glass of wine. It's very different than just kind of having it and feeling guilty and feeling irresponsible or beating yourself up, or also just having it without any thought at all, right? Because then one becomes 20 or
Yeah,
10. 20 would be good.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, and that word absolutely is absolute, right? And that's the thing. I think also we are so familiar with punishing ourselves when we don't do
Oh
something.
gosh.
We are not familiar with celebrating ourselves when we do something.
Mhm.
You know, and that's another thing is what could you celebrate? What would the you a week from now, when you've successfully given up this form of chocolate every day or this form of sugar every day, how will the you 1 week from now feel?
Yes.
What will that you look back and feel about the you that's come through this week? You know,
Yeah.
so that future visioning of where they want to go, and that allows them to say, okay, so that's who you want to be. Get into the who of who they are there and then reverse engineer it. Okay, so what do you need to do now? What do you need to do now? What do you need to
Yes.
do? What's in your power to change?
Yes.
What is in your power to take responsibility for on this? You know, so getting that buy-in is really, really key. And acknowledging that their expectations may be blanketed by disappointment because their expectations are too high. So bringing it down into bite-sized shifts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's important too, because I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day. We've all heard that saying,
Absolutely.
but sometimes we set unrealistic expectations and then we fall short and then we beat ourselves up. And guess what? Where's our energetic vibration now? We're in this downward spiral because now we're beating ourselves up, but we never set ourselves up to win to begin with.
Setting yourself up to win. It's really interesting. This conversation has reminded me of a conversation I had with somebody I used to know a long time ago. And there were three of us. We'd been out for dinner and then we went to the rugby to watch the rugby. And we'd been out for lunch. Now, at lunch, we had each had two courses. And when we came out, one girl who is always moaning about her weight, and in a very resentful way towards others who were not overweight. And she wasn't, but her body image was not so great. Anyway, so we came out of the restaurant and she went to the supermarket or the grocery store over the road and she bought two chocolate bars. And she ate those, and they were big chocolate bars. And she ate those chocolate bars in the 100 yards between the supermarket and the bar that we were going to. And we're in there, and she said, "Oh, I feel so fat right now. I feel so fat." And I said to her, "Well, you know, no disrespect, but perhaps two chocolate bars wouldn't have helped." And she absolutely flew at me, and she said, "Well, what you know, you've never been overweight in your life, right?" And that's not true. I was at dance college and for 3 years, every single day I was told I was too fat, every single day. You know, and what I said to her was, that's not true. And if you'd ever asked me a question about myself, you really would have known. So that was one thing. But more than anything, the reason that she always saw me as being slim was because I could control the impulse. I wanted the two chocolate bars. Don't get me wrong.
Of
Of course, I
course.
wanted the two chocolate bars.
Who
But I
doesn't want
knew,
two chocolate bars?
but I knew that the me that I would be if I ate them would feel so bad about myself over the years, or the weight that I would gain if I gave in to that impulse over the years, you know, and that would be so much worse than the joy that I got from the 2 chocolate bars. And this isn't a comment against this lady, at all. But the thing about it was I've exercised 3 to 4 times a week for
Mhm.
over 40 years,
Right.
right?
Right.
And menopause and, an almost 60-year-old body is showing it right now, and I need to make some of those changes. But there's a reason that people have perceived me to have never been fat. It's because I worked hard not to.
Right.
Does that make sense? It wasn't like I woke up one day and I never had to do it. It was consistent daily action
Right.
towards me not wanting to feel the fat that I felt when I was told I was fat every day for 3 years.
Yes.
Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of that sort of that conscious responsibility is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And knowing the impact on me and knowing which I wanted more,
Mhm.
and always making that choice. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's so hard to recognize the conscious responsibility that I wanted the chocolate bar more than I wanted to feel good about my body.
Yeah.
Right? And it feels brutal to say those words out
Right.
loud,
Right.
but conscious responsibility is in this moment when my resolve has failed and I reach for the very thing that I've said that I shouldn't have to, in that moment, the true conscious responsibility and truth of that is I want this more than I want that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And when we do that to ourselves, then we go, actually, I don't want this more than I wanted that. Milton Erickson, who was a famous hypnotherapist, he was a psychiatrist, and he also was the medic, Dr. Milton Erickson, who put hypnotherapy on the register, on
Yes.
the American Medical Association's register and in the UK. And he used to have clients we're talking about in the 50s and 60s,
Mhm.
even earlier now. And he would, whenever he had weight loss, people who wanted to come in to lose weight, and they were generally quite large. And in that day and age, they were, to be large was very unusual.
Right.
And I hope these words are acceptable. But he used to turn around to them and say, okay, I want you to go away and I want you to gain 2 stone. Or 360 pounds or 280 pounds or something like that. He would say, I want you to go away and come back when you've gained that. And they would say, oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I want to lose weight. I can't go away and put it on.
Mhm.
Go away and put on that weight. Don't come to me until you've put on that weight. And lo and behold, they would lose weight
Uh-huh.
because he gave them the paradoxical permission to go and eat more. And in that, they realized, I don't want to get that. He's given
Mhm.
them permission. So it's the art of the paradox as well within. Often the very thing that we don't want is the very thing that we are creating. Conscious, radical responsibility shows that up. It's not easy. Sometimes it doesn't feel good
Yep.
in the realization of it,
Yeah,
right? But the activation, therefore, and the willingness and commitment to the thing that we keep saying we want is much easier.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so powerful. So I hope everyone's really registering that because it gives us a chance. So if we can look at our lives and really get honest with ourselves about where we are creating the exact thing that we say we don't want, what opens up is a whole realm of possibility
Yeah.
to create change
Yeah.
and move forward without guilt or shame or this, that, or anything else, but
Yeah.
really transform the trajectory of our lives.
Absolutely. And that point, without guilt, without shame, this is not a me bashing exercise. This
Right.
is not, this is not an opportunity. Conscious responsibility is not blame. It's not fault. It's not judgment. It's not shame. It's not guilt. It's none of those things. It's this action is leading to this outcome.
Yes. Yes.
And if
Wow.
I want a different outcome, I need to do a different action. No shaming, no guilting, no judging, none of that stuff. Only, okay, I need a different action, and move into discovery of who you are without the shame,
Yes.
who you are without the judgment, without the guilt, without all of that failing that we're piling on top of ourselves. Who do you want to discover within you?
Yeah. Really, really powerful questions, Rachel. I'm absolutely loving this. So, before we conclude here, tell me, I always ask all of our guests, what are three things that three actions or exercises or what have you that they can take on now to actually begin making some of these changes practical in their lives?
Okay, the first thing I would do is invite you to look at what the real story is that's running.
Love it.
And so what is the real story I'm telling myself here? And I don't mean the generic I'm not good enough. Get specific. What is the real story I'm telling myself? And how is that impacting how I'm showing up?
Yeah.
How do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And who does that mean? How does she behave?
Yeah.
Right? So that if we begin the behaviors of the person we want to be now, so reverse engineering. Does that, so I didn't number them. I think there might have been.
Yeah, but that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I hope everyone has written that down. If not, go back, rewind, and re-listen because that is just extraordinarily powerful. Rachel, tell us more about your work. I know there are listeners who are probably wanting to be like, how do I find out more about what Rachel is up to and what her work is and what she's bringing out into the world? So how can they connect with you? Where can they find you? And we'll have all of this in the show notes for those of you who are listening, so you can go to the show notes and find it. But just in case, I want to make sure we cover it here, please.
So they can find me at rachelhudson.com or at dochange.co.uk. They can work with me. I have a Big Bang program, which is kind of 3 months of one-to-one. I have an absolute magnitude. Absolute magnitude is our true brightness, by the way. That gets obscured. That's a 6-month program. I have a Foundations Rewritten program, which is helping people uncover the stories and rewrite the stories that are the foundations to their lives, that the lives they don't want or the lives that they want to change. And we shift those stories. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook.
I'll find all of those. And then for our listeners too, Rachel is with an Rachael.
Absolutely.
So Rachel with an AEL at the end, Hudson.com is where to find it. So
I have a wonderful little 10-minute resilience reset that it's a video and resource if you'd like. I'm so happy to give that to your audience.
Please, yes. Well, we'll make sure that it's in the show notes so they can grab the link and take that on because, hey, every little bit helps, Yeah. And so I thank you so much for being here with us today, for opening up our eyes to all these other possibilities, to helping us step into who we truly are. And thank you for the work and the gifts that you bring to the world and the lives that you make a difference in.
Right back at you. Thank you, Dr. D. I'm so glad our paths crossed those years ago.
Me too. Me too. All right, everyone. We'll see you next Thursday for the next episode of True Wellness with Dr. D. This is Dr. D reminding you to tune into your body, connect with what matters, and embrace the journey to true wellness. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to redefine their health. Be sure to grab a copy of the True Wellness checklist right in the show notes. Let's keep redefining wellness and empowering change together. See you for the next episode.